welcome to Week 5, Leadership and Partnerships. I hope you enjoyed the last 2 weeks with our guest lecture. Now we're going back to our original format where I will record short videos of the different sections of the presentation this week. As I mentioned in the review of part 1 of the team project, a lot of what we're covering this week will relate directly to your assignment. So we'll be reviewing your group project ideas and give you feedback early this week. Okay, so here are our learning objectives for the week. So part 1 and part 2, we're going to talk about teams and leadership because they go hand in hand. So the reason we wanted to cover teams is because many of you are already working professionals and you work on teams on a regular basis. This may not be the case for some of you and most of our on-ground students. So it's really important to understand the importance of teams and team dynamic and working together cohesively. I'm sure you're already getting a feel for the culture of your teams for your project, and I want you to use the Leadership Compass self-assessment as a tool in your group, and we'll talk a little bit about that too. But outstanding teams focus on accomplishing a particular goal. All the members of the team are operating as a single unit where everyone knows what everyone else is to do. This is a really important one, the third one, that comes up not only in class projects, but I'm sure you see a lot of this in your individual work and personal relationships. This willingness to set aside ego and personal ambition for the sake of the team. A high level of commitment and trust between and among team members. So let's just reflect for a moment. If you were in a classroom and I asked this question, raise your hand if you like working in groups. The vast majority of you will not raise your hands. And I understand this, especially in the dynamics of a class. When you either don't know people to self-select into teams or you're selected by your professor, i.e. me, into your teams. This can cause stress. And a lot of that stress and anxiety comes from the last bullet. At the moment that you are selected in a team, you don't know the level of commitment and you probably don't have very much trust among your team members. By the end of the semester, I hope to hear from you all that your groups are going well and you trust each other and that everyone had a high level of commitment. Part of that comes from coming up with a plan, giving everybody jobs, and allowing each individual to carry out their job. So some ways of improving team effectiveness. So the leadership. Some of you will have selected a formal leader of your group, but often in the workplace, we see informal leaders, individuals who may not actually have a true leadership role designated by the unit, but they take on leadership characteristics and help bring the group together. I suggest you have an individual who will take the lead in ensuring that all the components come together. Not that they have to do it all, but that someone is steering the ship. So some ineffective methods of group decision making are free riders and groupthink. I'm sure all of you can think of someone or some groups where there are free riders, where certain individuals don't really put forth their own ideas, but just go along with the group. Now, when deciding on the topic I'm sure you saw some people who were very passionate about a topic, some who were, not so passionate and were willing to do whatever the group wanted. That is fine. A free rider, though, is someone who is not going to take a leadership role or make any decisions and kind of fall back throughout the process. This is not good for effectiveness. Another issue that can happen, which is why we need to respect and really appreciate group dynamics and differences, is this idea of groupthink, where everyone is seeing the problem from the same place, same direction, perspective, what have you. And so you all kind of come at it the same way and you get groupthink. This sounds like not a bad thing. That means there's not a lot of tension or dynamics, but just think of how this works in public health. When individuals who choose to be in the field of public health come together, they often have kind of a core set of values or things that are important to them. And that might be the social justice aspects, interest in evidence-based decision-making and evidence-based public health, leaning towards maybe more inclusiveness of individuals, the greater good over the individual type of ideas. Well, if you just work with people that think the way you do, and you don't allow yourself to be open to others and how they think, then your programs and policies and interventions are going to lack a community focus and are not going to meet the needs of everyone. You're going to go out and be so excited about whatever it is that you're bringing forth to the community, and you're going to be bombarded with different ideas, individuals who don't feel like they were engaged, feel marginalized by your ideas, and that can be pretty stunning. It is better to have a diverse group that looks like the members of the community, and in this case, your group can be very diverse just based on your own experiences, and please allow that to be incorporated into your projects, because it's going to be better when you take into account different perspectives than everyone kind of just going at it the same way. So a couple other things that are really important for effective teams. Group learning. So you're all going to come at it and this is just building on this groupthink idea, coming at it from a different set of skills, talents, and insights. And it's that collective of those skills, talents, and insights that come together and help the group be cohesive and move towards learning. You're going to learn from each other and the environments in ways that are not available to individual members. We cannot all have had the same life experiences and job experiences and backgrounds in our education. That's not feasible. That's why it's important to have group learning, so that you can learn from each other and build that into your group and your end product. So there are 5 different kind of group development aspects that happen: forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. I wish the last one rhymed with the other ones, but it doesn't. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each one of these, and I'm sure you can think of either with your project or other aspects of your life where you see these different developments. So the first step is forming, and this is when you are getting to know each other. You sent the group email and say, hey, group 7, it's great to be in a team with you. Now let's start thinking about what our project is. My name is Kate. I'm from blah, 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 blah. Who are you? So you're learning from each other. The next phase is the storming. This is where there's conflict. And some of us shy away from conflict. Others of us, like myself, really like conflict. Good conflict, not, personal attacks or individual hurt feelings. But this idea of you're coming up with your ideas for your topic, what your coalition's going to look like in the second half, what your interventions are going to look like, and you're going to have differences of opinions. And there should be some conflict. If there wasn't, then that is probably either a groupthink issue or nobody really is passionate. That's worse, in my opinion, than some good kind of back and forth, working out what you want to actually do. I'm sure you guys had some storming. The next phase is norming. So this is where, after you've had that kind of conflict, you come to consensus and cohesion. When you have respected each other and learned from each other and come up with the idea that you're putting forth. And you say, this is what we're doing, and you have consensus and cohesion. Performing is where each member has a responsibility and they are carrying it out. This is the productive phase. So once you've decided on your topic, you've kind of coalesced and decided what you're going to do, you're going to assign tasks. And the performing time is when you're all working on your tasks. Again, that last little piece is that individual who's going to come and look carefully at the rubric and check off everything and make sure everybody's done their parts. And then the last phase, all teams and groups will end. When you have ended, that the purpose of the group, you're going to end. So when you've accomplished the goal and the team ends. So for this class, the team will end at the end of the semester. And that's a natural part in this development. So just remember that these are your typical phases of team development, and it's normal to have some conflict. It's good. But you have to move on. You can't be sitting there never coming to consensus. Sometimes that happens where groups just cannot come together. Typically is due to the ego piece, the lack of trust, and commitment. So if you can set a good foundation at the beginning, you'll be able to make it through the storming, past the norming, and get to the productive phase. Okay, the next part, we're going to talk about leadership characteristics. Okay, I want you to think about your favorite job. It could be a summer job in high school or college. It could be the job you're working now. It could be a job you really liked. I want you to just think of what that job was. And then I want you to think of your least favorite job. And then reflect on what role your boss or manager played in your decision about which was your favorite and least favorite job. So leadership, and this comes from a book called Public Health Leadership, Putting Principles into Practice by Rowitz. And he says that leadership is creativity and action, being able to see the present in terms of the future while meaning respect for the past. And public health leadership is a commitment to the community and its values. And this requires systems thinking. And then when we talk about community, it's both the local community and a global sense of community, because everything that is happening in your community is impacted by the world outside. And just similarly, things that are happening outside of your local community will end up having an impact on that community. And public health leadership has a commitment to social justice, but not in so much that it neglects an evidence base. They identified 5 leadership essentials. The first is the ability to identify the most useful information and use it. This plays into evidence-based decision making. So being able to find good information and then utilizing it. The ability to motivate and work with others. Leaders have to take risks, but you also have to follow through. Being able to communicate on different levels. This is key not only for leaders in public health, but for all public health. We will interface in public health with individuals at many different levels. You may be interfacing with leaders in the community or policymakers, and you communicate with them in a certain way. With your colleagues, your boss, your subordinates, and you'll communicate in different ways to motivate and work with them. And then with the general public, and understanding how to best communicate and articulate messages to those different levels is key. And then again, ability to act as a system thinker with an understanding of how complexity affects their work. The work in public health requires you to be able to really think in a very critical, high-functioning level. Okay, so just a couple of examples from this book, Being a Leader by Warren Bennis. And in this book, he identifies different characteristics along the practitioner, manager, and leader. Now, this is not making a judgment call on how practitioners think and see the world as wrong, or managers, they just need to be more like leaders, or leaders, they got their head in the sky. It's just showing how at different levels there are different ways of seeing the world. So for example, practitioners, they're implementers. They're the ones who are putting forth programs and services. Managers are administrators, and so they make sure that the implementation is administered properly. And leaders innovate. One that I like as well from this list is practitioners ask who and where. Very much in that present. Who is it and where? Managers are thinking about how and when so that they can plan. And leaders ask what and why. And finally, practitioners focus on those programs and services. Managers focus on systems and structures, and leaders focus on the people. So you can see this list, and it's only a brief list from that book. Okay, one of the last things we'll talk about under leadership is emotional intelligence, REI. So when you think about that boss that was at your favorite job and your least favorite job, a lot of that may relate to the leader's emotional intelligence, because the leader sets the emotional intelligence culture for the organization. This can directly impact morale, turnover, relationships with colleagues, and ultimately patient or community relationships. When you ask employers, what is the most important thing for an individual to come out of their master's with? They often say it's really important that they have the skills, be it an epidemiologist, a biostatistician, behavioral health educator, a health administrator, that they come out with a foundation of skills. which we can ensure those skills because we have a competency-based program. So they're not too worried about students coming out with the skills. What is more important to them is the emotional IQ or intelligence of individuals, what is sometimes called the soft skills. When you ask, IQ plays a role in about 6% of what's important, and EI, or EQ, emotional quotient, somewhere between 27 and 45%. You'll hear managers often say, I can teach someone how to run an analysis. I can teach someone how we set up our surveillance. I can teach someone how we report out on our deliverables. I cannot teach someone how to work well with others. So personal competence is the foundation of EI. It comprises self-awareness and self-management and grows from a foundation in personal competence. So these are those soft skills. Skills in self-perception and self-expression. These fall into those personal competence. I'm sure you've all had bosses or had lectures where the person just is totally not, doesn't have self-perception. You can be sitting in a lecture and everybody's eyes are glazed over and the person just doesn't get it. Or they just don't seem to understand why people are interacting with them and responding to them in a certain way, because they may not have that self-perception and then the ability to express oneself. You have stress management, that decision-making, social awareness, that's a social competence, interpersonal relationships, and relationship management. So it's really one's ability to conduct constructive interpersonal interactions, communicate, maintain professionalism under stress. It's really what it all comes down to. There are lots of different online tools you can use to check your emotional intelligence. This is a little bit harder to change. A lot of it is what we think of as personality. But if you find an area where you have a weakness, it doesn't mean you're always going to be someone who doesn't work well under stress or someone who just doesn't play well with others. That is not the case. But it requires that self-perception and then a desire to make self-improvements. Okay. Final part under leadership is cultural competence. So this is a key and a very important component of the work we do in public health. So to really understand cultural competence, or really understand its importance, you have to understand the role culture has on individuals and communities. Culture exerts a significant influence on health-seeking behaviors, attitudes, diet, and choice of healthcare resources, etc. We see individuals in our communities that have different health-seeking behaviors based on their culture. Diet is one of those things that is probably most apparent across cultures, but it's really important to understand someone's cultural diet or preferences when talking to them about things they may need to change. My family comes from Louisiana, and we like certain foods that may not be necessarily health foods. But there are ways that I have and my family has found to cook things healthier. So maybe when we make red beans and rice or white beans and rice, we don't have to use so much fat back. That sounds like sacrilegious, but that's one way to change the fat, and maybe looking at different ways of seasoning food that don't make them bland, but also is sensitive to the cultures. Communities of color and immigrant communities, we often see differences in their choice of healthcare resources and health-seeking behaviors, especially when it comes to who is their preferred provider of health care. And that differs based on culture. So it's really important to understand that culture is very much a major influencer on all these different aspects, and this is a very short list. So to increase your cultural competency and cultural sensitivity, there's a couple things you can do. Have some self-awareness. This goes back to that EI. Understand your own strengths and weaknesses as well as your own prejudices. We all have preconceived ideas about others. You may have cultural competency or cultural sensitivity with one group, but another group you may not. And really understanding and being true to yourself and self-aware of those will help you to increase your competency. Be alert of opportunities to receive feedback. And be welcoming to feedback. Feedback on how you interact with people from different cultures or from different backgrounds is really important. And getting that feedback is an opportunity to impact the next one, becoming a lifelong learner. You want to look out for opportunities for knowledge and skill development. Learn about different cultures. Learn about the people in your community. Talk with them and understand where they're coming from. You want to integrate your work life and personal life and maintain multicultural perspectives in both. Often we like to separate, this is what I do at work and this is what I do at home. But really, if you integrate those and allow yourself to be open to multicultural perspectives, you're going to grow in your competency and sensitivity. And I think one of the most important things is to learn to respect differences between people. This world would be so boring if everybody saw it the same way. And it gets back to that groupthink. We need different perspectives and differences among people for us to really grow and have this life full of opportunities and full of different ideas. And as we talked about last week with the inherent politicalness of healthcare reform, there's a lack of respect of differences in people nationwide. And that has led to a lot of challenges. So I challenge us all to respect differences between people. Not everybody's going to see the world the same way as you, and that's okay. As long as you treat them with respect, and in turn, hopefully they will treat you with respect as well. On a final note about cultural competence, it is thinking from a global perspective. The culture of organizations within a region are greatly affected by the context in which it operates and from which it draws its workers. So if you have an organization that does not look like the community it's in, that typically is not ideal. You want to draw from that community as much as you can to ensure that your organization culture is closely aligned to the culture of the community. Okay, that's it for this short lecture.